Welcome to the Prime Venture Partners podcast. Today, I am delighted to have with us one of our very own entrepreneurs, Shihab Muhammed. He's co-founder and CEO of SurveySparrow. Welcome to the show, Shihab.
Thank you so much, Amit, for having me. Great to be a part of your show.
Been great, Shihab, having known you and worked with you now for a couple of years. But you had a storied career, having graduated as a young engineer and then joined Zoho right off the bat, which is probably the mother of all Indian, product or perhaps SaaS companies. And then you also spent a lot of time at Freshworks. So maybe we can start with your early days of getting started at Zoho. How was that experience? What did you learn from that?
I was just fortunate to be in Zoho. Rather, I would say I didn't make into any of the service companies. Even I couldn't make into one of the service company because I had one back paper in my 7th semester. And it was a place where they hire even if you have one history of back paper if it is there. And that's how I landed there. And that's where I learned a lot of things as a human. So basically beyond the product and things, one of the best learning was how to fly high while staying grounded. You interact with a lot of very nice, humble, grounded people, and you will learn a lot from them. I was an electronics graduate. I didn't have any computer science background. And for somebody with a background of electronics, coming into a product company like Zoho and learning coding, especially Java coding, I was not good at it. It took 2 months there for me to learn that skill, then start coding there. And I made a lot of good friends, and I learned a lot in Zoho, especially like I met even Girish Madhurgudam of Freshworks at Zoho, and that became a pivotal point in my life also, because I learned a lot from Zoho. And then again, I was fortunate to be part of Freshworks story. I became employee number 3 after Girish and Shan. And that changed my life itself. So whomever I am today is because of definitely Zoho and Freshworks.
Absolutely. So let's stick to Zoho. I loved the quote that you used with 2 interesting things. One, I didn't know about your back papers. That's cool. But also about flying high while staying grounded. Maybe you can elaborate that a little bit with example. The other thing, of course, that Sridhar Vembu, who we've been trying to get on our podcast for a while, has been saying is how talent was cultivated and recruited from anywhere, really. And I think now again that we are back into the talent wars, in terms of lots of funding, unicorns, now your IPO companies, etc. I think there's a lot to be said about how talent gets recruited and groomed at Zoho. So maybe you can talk about both flying high and staying grounded, as well as a little bit. What were some of the more interesting places where people came from at Zoho, just like yourself?
Yeah, Zoho was more of a, say, maybe catch them young or catch at 22 kind of a place where you won't see a lot of lateral hires, while majority of people are very smart kids who might not be very good in communication, but actually they can solve any problem. For example, I still remember is like all the interview questions which my interviewer asked me, and I think almost 90% of them were puzzles and problem solving kind of thing. And that will bring a lot of people who, one is like aspirational people who want to solve bigger, and they might not be from the tier 1 colleges, mostly from a tier 2 college. And that will give us like the basic essence of the talent with high aspiration. And they generally hire for attitude, because obviously all these 22-year-old kids who are just get out of college, they won't have much skills needed, but at the same time, you are thoroughly checked on your attitude. If you have the right attitude and reasonable problem solving skill, you can get into Zoho. And maybe that is the reason is like, see, Zoho today, when I look back, right, it is one of the company which I have seen is like a low employee turnover. I haven't seen any company which is actually is that low. And that is because of the right attitude, people coming in, and a culture is being built whereas people are helping each other to grow. And that is something wonderful thing which you experience. You need to experience beyond the words to experience that Zoho culture. And obviously, when you come from that, sometimes you come from the remote villages, and with all those things, people who are coming from with a good heart, and you learn a lot of things like compassion. You will learn how to be grounded. All those good character will be built along with you in that stint at Zoho.
Absolutely. It's phenomenal. And I know of another Pune-based company which would hire people for whom English was not a natural language of communication, but they were very good at problem solving. And exactly like you said, their retention for their employees was super high, right? Because they were very committed to the culture and to the inclusiveness of their employer. So let's talk about the transition to Freshworks and some of the early days. So what was your Freshworks joining story? I recently saw, of course, congratulations on the IPO for Freshworks, but I also saw one of the early pictures in that 2 or 3 BHK in Chennai with you and 4 or 5 other people, including Girish and Shan. So maybe just talk to us how you joined Freshworks and maybe the first year or so at the company.
I was again really fortunate, or maybe it's like right place at the right time kind of thing. So in October 2010, I got an offer in another company to be a lead engineer for building something like Facebook for health. That point, Fitbit was not very popular. So there was a Chennai company which wanted to build something like Fitbit. And the same time, Girish was also like leaving Zoho to start Freshworks. Obviously, he came to know I'm leaving. And once I left, is like Girish called me and told me the thing on the weekend that he's starting Freshdesk that point. Today it is Freshworks. And he asked me, do you want to join Freshdesk? But I don't have money to pay. So that was, then I told him, I do have a mortgage. Mortgage cost around 8,000 rupees monthly, because my mom wanted to stay in a concrete house, and I built her kind of thing, a 2-storied house for her while I was in Zoho. And that loan was there. So I told him, see, I'm not married, but if you can pay the loan, that is the only thing. And he was happily told me that one, that we can take care, you don't need to worry about it. That sounds like, okay, I got into Freshdesk. We were just, Shan and Girish were sitting in the room, and I was fortunate to be the third person in the room. It was just 100 square feet room in Velachery. And then that changed the life, especially for me and many other people. And regarding the Chennai, maybe today is like you have something, but that point there was nothing in that place. And that is not a house. It was, you have this, the place where is like you store all these the agriculture things. And that was a place. And then we changed that into an office. That point, we can't afford a bigger office space. And that's how like that small office space is being built. And the picture is when we won the Microsoft award. That's the picture you're referring to.
That's right. That's right. So how were some of the early lessons from Freshworks? Because a lot of our listeners here on the podcast are early stage entrepreneurs. And obviously things have changed. It's 10 years later. SaaS has become global. Freshworks is IPO, or Freshdesk as it was called then. So maybe some lessons in terms of what were you guys doing early on that, if you reflect back, were good things that stuck with the company and helped you guys be successful later on?
Definitely from Freshdesk, the product which we were building as first product, right? So we were obsessed about the product. We made sure that one is like we are shipping the right product. We were making sure that one it is a minimum usable product instead of a minimum viable product, which I am a huge advocate of. So make sure that when the customer journeys, be it is the ticket coming into your help desk to replying to that, and that should be flawlessly. So we made sure that when the product is really good, that is the center of all those things. And honestly, in 2010, if you talk about Chennai, there was, we didn't hear much about funding or VC world, to be honest. And the whole idea was like, how do you make a month $10,000 so that the 6 of us, which you are seeing in the picture, can take some salary and have a decent life. That's the whole plan of is like, okay, building a right product. So if you build a good product, yeah, we can make $10,000 a month so that we all can feed our family. That was the whole idea. And from there, yes, it scaled. Obviously, along with the company, I also scaled. One another important thing for my life is how do I turn from an engineer to a business leader? That is something is like, that just happened at Freshworks journey, because there is this thing called one of the beliefs, or is like, which I read initially. The title of the article in Forbes was, if you are not leaving your Legos, you're not going to grow along with the company, right? That was the title of the company. So what it says is, company, especially a startup, will grow very fast in a particular time frame, because that's how every startup is meant for. Initial employee or as an engineer, you are coming there only about engineering and you know how to code. Beyond that one, if you want to grow, you will have to leave your chair in every 6 months or 1 year, so that somebody else will come and pick up that one, and then you can move into next level. If you're not doing that one, you will be stuck. And not just you, sometimes even the company is stuck there because of the influence you are creating. Sometimes what happens is like, people will hang on into what emotionally attached into what they're doing, and then they'll try to hang on the Lego which they are trying to build the building. So the best learning was how to leave that one. And I myself changed my job title at least 5-6 times in that period, until I became the business head for a hugely successful fresh service. It is a separate BU right inside Freshworks, and that's another biggest learning.
Got it. Two things I want to double click on. One is, of course, this minimum usable product as opposed to minimum viable product.
Correct.
And have you taken that? We'll talk about SurveySparrow next, but have you taken that learning here as well? And can you elaborate on that for why that is more interesting to do? And then I'll come about the job role and the Lego blocks later.
Okay, definitely we took that learning in SurveySparrow also. See, one of the things what we did at SurveySparrow is we actually launched our first version of the product in 6 months, but we made sure that when it is actually usable to at least some set of people, with the idea that we wanted to create the most engaging feedback platform ever. That is the whole idea, because we found the typical response rate for any survey is 10 to 15%. And this is when it's like people are giving you feedback for free of cost. That point, when you're getting free of cost, you need to make sure that when the experience, the survey taker or the feedback, the person who's giving you feedback should be the best experience. And that's where the thought process came, and we made the best possible first chat survey software, and we made sure that when that particular piece, whereas like people are taking the surveys, is most engaging one. And that was the whole point of is like doing SurveySparrow itself. When you ask me how do you made is like a minimum usable product, you can only go with this particular thing and you can release it. But at the same time, most of the time people might need to, when you want to do this one, you might need a C name to be, people wanted to white label your product, because nobody wanted to carry SurveySparrow's logo. Nobody wanted to carry SurveySparrow's URL when they are getting feedback from their customers. Obviously, they need to make sure that when it is looking as it on their own kind of thing. We all do branding for ourselves. So that is something is like which we added along with that one to make sure that when the customer is happy using SurveySparrow and distributing that to customers. So what we did is, one of the hack we did is very early, just after is like, okay, while launching is like, okay, I was fortunate to meet this lady, Tracy from Canada, and she was running a group of marketing enthusiasts who would like to test new software product. So what I did is I told her, and she was also starting is like that, wanted to make some noise on that particular group. And she told me, if you can give me this product for a year, for a month's cost, I will bring you probably 500 customers. So I wanted to make sure that when the person who is giving me the feedback has got some skin in the game, because if you're getting feedback from somebody who's not using your product, that's not of high value. So what Tracy did is she distributed this thing, and within 2 days, she herself brought 500 customers, and that also paid customers who opened their wallets to use SurveySparrow. And we started getting continuously the feedback, because they already paid for this one. And then in a very short span of next 3 months, because of this feedback, we made the product so solid that one we added another 500 more customers in the 50 days.
Yeah, I think a lot of interesting things in terms of the distribution being as important as the product, particularly in the early days. One quick question on Freshworks, and then we should move forward, which is, when you say change your job title every 6 to 12 months, how do you still bring a culture of accountability and some stickiness. Because if I'm doing one product, go on to some other product, then third day go on to be product management, fourth day go on to a business role of some other unit, then how do you make sure that kind of some delivery, accountability, consistency is happening?
So what I mean by changing the job role doesn't mean that when we are changing completely a different business unit or anything, which is needed by the business which you are running. Also, you can't just leave your seat unless you have another person who's going to replace in your chair. I was fortunate to get the right people on time, and we spent with them maybe a month, and then by the time it's like he can do this job, and so that you can focus on something else, you leave that one. So basically it's more of thinking like, if something can be done by somebody else, let me give that one to, he is the best person to do it, and let me move and find out the next job. You are creating a team, right? A team is actually working to the things like much better. And if somebody else is good at what you're doing, just leave what you're doing to them and find out your next thing. That's the best way to grow also, because otherwise a typical engineer who can code will not turn into heading a business unit, right? Which involves a lot more processes and involves a lot more, because it's not just the product. You should know what is the basics of, at least even if you're not the best person, at least you should know basics of marketing, you should know basics of sales, you should know how to do pre-sales, you should know like how to do product, and you will do also. It is not like you are going to be just the boss sitting there. So you have to be the first one who will be selling your first product, and you should be the one who's giving the pre-sales to or demo to your customer. You should be the one who's waking up at the night and giving the support to the customer. Then only you will do those things.
Got it. How about now the picking of the idea for SurveySparrow, right? And I also draw a parallel, of course, to your previous company, but let's talk about SurveySparrow. There was already a bunch of companies, some of which have done very well, like from SurveyMonkey to Medallia to Qualtrics and so on. So how did you narrow down on this idea? And can you talk a little bit about that?
So while I was in Freshworks itself, I used to have a good relationship with my bank, and I have an amazing relationship manager over there also. So they generally used to ask, even you will get every month while talking to relations, there is one survey is there, can you just give me 5-star rating? So just like that, people used to tell to take a huge survey at that point, and I was not taking. Again, we were using internally some of this Google Forms kind of thing, which was not very mobile friendly and not engaging. And the response rate were very low. And that was the initial thought behind this one. And again, I saw there is a shift is happening in 2015, 2016. Everything was moving towards a lot more conversational, chatty things. Be it as you take WhatsApp, which was growing like anything and getting into 1.8 billion users. And on Facebook, if you're taking Facebook Messenger was overtaking Facebook usage itself by 20%, and intercom, Slack, a lot of things coming that point, just because it's like the mainstream conversation is coming and chat kind of interface is coming. And that's where the initial thought process came. But at the same time, that was not the only decision point. So basically, you will need to have a big market. Basically, it's like whatever the market you are going to go after should be at least $1 billion market. That point itself, if you really see the experience management market or more of a survey or feedback collection market, that point itself is like the revenue of top 3 players were over $1 billion. Today, that number is much higher, and the total market cap of top 2 players alone is actually 30 billion. And that's a huge opportunity. And I also noticed one pattern where one of the player, Qualtrics, is predominantly looking or going after an enterprise segment, while SurveyMonkey or small players were going after an SMB or a freelancer play. Why there is a gap in the mid-market space where nobody was going after that one exclusively. And that is also added into this thing. When all these things comes together, sometimes maybe it's like a data plus will give you, oh, here is an opportunity. Probably this is my opportunity to build next thing, right? So that's how it's like, okay, we got into SurveySparrow.
Makes sense. The other interesting choice you made was moving to Kerala and picking Kochi as the place to start this. So talk to us a little bit about, I know you have personal affinity for Kerala, but about how has that journey been with respect to building a new age SaaS product company from Kochi, and also hiring in that area, because Chennai had become the hub for SaaS startups. And so can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, one of the things on personal side is, okay, my wife also wanted to, we were shifting between Kerala and Chennai. She will always stay 2 months in Kerala and 2 months in Chennai kind of thing. And that also is like would have added into that one. But on the other side, after starting, how do you attract people? Because the knowledge or the points I made about Zoho, that was still with me. So you can actually get good people, attitude kind of thing, and you can still train some of them. Maybe they are not from SaaS background, but still is good people who can code. There are a lot of people who can write very well. And there was a lot of designers also, right? These were the basic ingredients needed to build a good product. And that really helped in Kochi. And that also sometimes, is, to be honest, is like the cost compared to a metro was at least 20% lower than the initial cost of hiring and then building the product. And those were the experiences. One of the thing, maybe because people in Kerala reads a lot, and we got some of amazing marketers, writers. Even I'm seeing one pattern is like majority of companies today, designers are maybe either from Kerala or some background related to that design kind of thing. And that also added. So it was a perfect fit for building your, so that's, and we were able to attract the right people into SurveySparrow.
What do you see is the journey for SurveySparrow going forward in terms of what are the next big sort of things to conquer for the company?
As a product or as a company right now, we moved from a point solution to more of a platform today. We wanted to be the superstore of feedback, right? So where the feedback collection is happening, we wanted to get the feedback and we wanted to help our customers to build brands. Basically, I'm a huge believer of Kaizen. Kaizen is the continuous improvement process. And that is the reason probably Toyota is today is one of the best companies in the world. The term Kaizen itself is coming Chinese, Japan side. And you can see is like they continuously improve their product. And today Japan is a synonym for best product. So just like that, if you continuously get feedback at every touch point, be it is customer touch point or employee touch point, you get your feedback. For example, just after sales, you get the feedback from customers. When they come for a support, you get in that touch point, get a feedback. Then again, every quarterly is like, okay, you do QBR or you do an NPS survey, you do a CSAT whenever a ticket is closed. So if you get feedback from these multiple touch points, and if you carefully listen to that one and then act on it, over the period, you will build a brand, because you're not just doing one thing. You are listening into every touch point. And over the period is like, you will have an amazing support team. You will have an amazing product, because like, okay, you might be doing a product feedback surveys and especially customer effort score, SES, right? SES is a measure of how easy was your onboarding into your product. So you do CES, then you do CSAT when a support a ticket came. When you get is like this 360 view of feedback from your customers. Again, it's like you are doing this monthly with your employees. The best way to build a company is just as, okay, employee first company, right? When you build an employee first company, obviously they'll take care of the customers. So now you actually get feedback from your employees every month. And then probably is like, okay, when they are onboarding, when they are exiting the company, when after 90 days of their onboarding. So in all these touch points which an employee will go through. So maybe you can call it as employee life cycles. So if you get feedback throughout the employee life cycle, you will know like how to cater or like what to change in your organization to listen by listening to your employees also. So essentially, if you keep doing these things over the period, you will become the brand. So that's the whole idea of SurveySparrow, and we will continue to invest, and we will go after that mission of helping our customers to build brands.
Great, Shihab. Let's switch gears and talk about the global SaaS market and all kinds of interesting new SaaS companies coming out of India. I know you avidly follow this everywhere across the globe. So can you talk about some of the trends that you are seeing in terms of the overall global SaaS market, or even from the Indian landscape?
Overall, what we are seeing is companies are turning a lot more a product-led approach. Just to give you a little history of how SaaS is actually changed, right? For some of us, it is still SaaS, but there is a transition which happened from 2000 to 2020. So in 2000s, it was all sales-led companies like Salesforce, which is the first SaaS company, probably the one who invented cloud, right? And they created an amazing product, and they directly started selling into the C-level suite, field level salespeople who will directly go and sell into the C-suite, and which might not be affordable to that point. It was not affordable to SMBs also, because that model will not scale for a SMB business. But if you take is like, okay, next set of companies, you take HubSpot, you take Zendesk, you take Freshdesk, everything. Those were marketing led companies. Basically, you have an amazing product. Then you do is like, okay, you have an amazing marketing team, which will get people inbound marketing, using the inbound marketing, either via Google AdWords or via content. Everything is, you have word of mouth or whatever it is, you are attracting people to your website, and there is an inquiry, and then you are actually is like selling to them. And that actually made it affordable to mid-market and even to higher end of SMB. But if you see again, it's like the journey in 2015 to 2020, you can see today Slack is becoming the new sensation. Then Monday.com is another company, or Notion is there. All these companies has got a common thread again is there. It is all about the product-led growth. Basically, the lower end of the pyramid, that means the analyst or the person who's really using this product, and you made it completely freemium, and you allow them to use it. And after using it, they will go and tell your boss, hey, this is an amazing product. For example, Notion, that is happening. See, I myself heard is at least 5 times from employees, I wanted to use. No, you don't have a choice. You have to buy an enterprise license of Notion so that everybody in the company can use it. So that is the typical product-led story. So this is what is the trend which is happening in the last 20 years. So the change of sales-led to marketing-led to product-led is happened. Now, the next thing which I'm seeing is one of the things, as you move up the market, now a data center or data security is becoming increasingly, right? Earlier, nobody used to ask, only enterprises used to ask, do you have a SOC 2 report? Are you ISO? Today, even SMB or mid-market started asking, are you ISO? Are you a SOC compliant? Maybe because today, nobody goes beyond the on-premise solution. So if you take probably 5-year or 8-year back, people still were hybrid. There were people who will still buying the on-premise, and then they were installing it inside because of all these data privacy concerns. Today, even they are moving towards cloud, but only criteria are they now. Instead of pushing you the physical criteria, now they actually created a policy where inside the policy they are writing, okay, we need the data center to be inside our country. That is a policy number 1. And then is like ISO compliant. Then is like all those kind of, that is another thing which we are seeing.
Yeah, there are 2 other dimensions which I would love to get your thoughts on. One is this whole thing about vertical SaaS versus horizontal. And the other one, which we talk a lot about, SMB versus real mid-market versus enterprise. Can you talk about what are some of the trends that you're seeing in both in terms of horizontal versus vertical and SMB versus enterprise?
Yeah. So the vertical SaaS is gaining momentum. The reason for that one is your target customer is really defined. For example, Zenoti is one of a typical example from India itself. So Zenoti goes after all this saloon. Another one is CareStack again. So going after dental. One advantage which we are seeing by interacting with obviously CareStack and all, what we are seeing is because they are focused, their TAM is getting expanded over the period by adding more features or more functionality into that particular product itself. So technically your net retention rate will be always on a higher side, which is a very good metric in the long run. But at the same time, if you don't have enough TAM in that particular market, it may not be very sexy for investors. So finding out a niche and then with an expandable TAM, because day one, you might not have the TAM size where total addressable market, whereas you don't already know about it. And if you can find a niche with an expandable TAM, definitely the vertical SaaS is going to be a huge story. And we are yet to find enough things, but we have seen some of these successes like Zenoti. On a horizontal side, the advantage is your TAM is already big and you can scale unlimitedly kind of thing. So that is there. But at the same time, what we are seeing is the NRR is not very high compared to the vertical SaaS. But at the same time, you can really build an amazing product with much larger pool. And so I won't take any sides, but both are actually two different things. And one is NRR game, which is hopefully you are expanding as you grow. And the other one is you already know it is there, the opportunity is there, you are building the best thing in that particular market.
Agreed. And I think the GTM will be very different for both as well, right? Inherently, one will already have, the horizontal one will have a lot more spread out customer base with different use cases across different geographies, whereas the vertical one can be much more targeted in terms of getting the flywheel spinning.
Correct.
How about SMB versus mid-market versus enterprise?
So I personally didn't experience a place where directly building for an enterprise, but what is I have seen is building initially for SMB, then is slowly moving up the market is what we were doing throughout in my career. That is the whole thing I have done it. The reason being, you will get a lot of feedback from SMB, and you will over the period, you'll build an amazing product, which can be used by the mid-market also. You might need to add a little bit more bells and whistles, like what I mentioned, your data center, your security, your who can access it, kind of thing. So a lot of security features you will add. With those things, mostly is like an SMB product can be used by even mid-market also. Then after that one, if you have the real scale and then use cases, sometimes what is happening is we ourselves will build as some of the part. So by keeping the current product, which is easy to trial, easy to use and all, some of the modules you will build and you will keep it a little bit of either is in a locked way, and you will move into enterprise and you will unlock only for enterprise. This is the strategy which we were using. But if you ask me, is directly going to enterprise, unless otherwise you knows that particular market and the founder has got an outbound DNA in them, I think it's that might work, because Salesforce has done it, because obviously the founder is a sales DNA is there. But for example, for me, the problem is my DNA is a product DNA, not a sales DNA. So if one of the founder is actually is a enterprise sales DNA, if it is there, that could also work. But at the same time, if your DNA in your founding team is product DNA or marketing DNA, I would not suggest going first into enterprise.
Great. As we come to an end of the podcast here, Shihab, you mentioned how you grew from being an engineer to a product leader to a business leader at Freshworks, and now an entrepreneur and CEO. What has your own personal learnings been? What have your personal learnings been? And what would you advise other entrepreneurs listening in terms of their own growth? You have to grow the company, of course, or your product, but you also need to grow yourself. So what has helped you along the journey for your own growth?
So I was always obsessed about customers and wanted to build something which is usable to the customers. So basically build something which can be used and happily used, I would say, not just used. So people will every day come to your product and they use it and they'll give amazing feedback. So before yesterday, I was personally giving a demo to a customer, a prospect. And then the lady just told this, if this is your brainchild, hats off to you. That's what is she told me. And that moment actually is tears were there in my eye. So I am that obsessed on the product. So you will build something is where somebody loves to use it and open their wallets for you. And definitely they'll open the wallets when they really love using your product. So that keep obsessed on that product and all other things will fall in place. You will get investor money. You are going to build a big company. Everything will follow that one if you really focus on that one thing.
Great. You didn't answer my question about your own. How did you learn about business? How did you learn about marketing? How did you learn about, let's say, team building, fundraising? So those are also things, even if you're obsessed on customer, how did you improve your skills as you went along?
Yeah. So one of the things is I was really fortunate to work with some of the best people, including Girish Madhurpudam, and he's an amazing storyteller. And again, doing everything is, for example, as I told in the first story itself, I didn't know how to code while joining Zoho. So one of the thing is I read a lot, one, and second is definitely I do it and then learn. So I have done personally almost everything in what a person can do in a SaaS company. I have personally written the code for at least 2 or 3 products. I have personally wrote blogs, even in SurveySparrow blog, you can see it's personally I wrote blogs, and I have personally done digital marketing, or I have personally, even today, I go and customer demos at least twice a week, right? Even now I go and reply in customer chats. I will go at least weekly is like 3 to 5 times. I'll go and reply for it, just because if you're not, you don't want to be away from those things. So the best way to learn things is by doing. And I think swimming can be taught only by reading. That's like my life is okay. I have done it all, including is like chai making for my early employees.
Wonderful. On that high note, Shihab, thank you again for being on the Prime Venture Partners podcast. It's been a delight to work with you on SurveySparrow, and appreciate you taking the time to record this with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Amit.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.